Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're tackling something every single planning engineer hits on day one. We're diving into the per-unit system, or PU for short, and looking at how we use it to completely normalize the whole grid. Let's get right into it.
So the source material sets us up with this incredibly relatable problem. Imagine trying to figure out your personal budget, right? But your salary is paid in US dollars, your rent is due in Japanese yen, and you have to buy all your groceries in euros. You literally can't figure out your bottom line without converting everything into one common currency. Well, the power grid is exactly like that. You just cannot mathematically compare 400 amps sitting in an 11 kV zone with 145 amps in a 33 kV zone or 55 amps in a 132 kV zone. It's apples, oranges, and, bananas. We desperately need one common scale so the whole system is speaking the exact same language.
To really hammer this home, the text highlights the chaos of a messy single-line diagram. Picture this. You've got an 11 kV generator feeding into 33 kV subtransmission lines, which then step all the way up to 132 kV transmission lines. If you try to run a load flow study using raw ohms and amps across all that, oh man, you'd have to manually track different voltages and completely awkward transformer ratios every single time you cross into a new zone. It just quickly becomes this massive, error-prone mess.
But here is the silver bullet the source presents to fix all that chaos: the per-unit system. Basically, instead of pulling our hair out over raw numbers, we express every system quantity, whether that's voltage, current, power, or impedance, simply as a fraction of a chosen common base value. By doing this, we completely unify the scale across the entire grid. That nightmare of thousands of volts and hundreds of amps, it magically transforms into clean, consistent, dimensionless numbers.
Now, what's really interesting about this visual is how it brilliantly illustrates that complex, multi-zone circuit on the top being elegantly normalized into a single continuous loop on the bottom. Up top, you've got zone 1, 2, and 3 all walled off by transformers with completely different voltage ratings. But down below, in our per-unit equivalent circuit, those pesky ideal transformers have essentially vanished. It takes a messy, multi-voltage network and beautifully reduces it to a simple system of continuous series impedances.
And that brings us to the wonderfully simple formula driving the whole shebang. The per-unit value is just your actual value divided by your chosen base value. Simple division. If we pick one system-wide power base and then set specific voltage bases for each individual zone, suddenly, every voltage in your entire network will just glow right around 1.0 pu. And because of how the math shakes out, those transformers become almost totally invisible in your calculations.
Okay, so how do we actually set these bases up? Well, the text lays out a really clear step-by-step sequence. First, you define your system-wide apparent power base and your nominal voltage base for a specific zone. Then, from there, your base current and your base impedance are simply derived from those initial power and voltage choices. You just let the formulas do all the heavy lifting for you. Once you lock in those bases for a given zone, every single physical component converts into a per-unit impedance with just simple division. No more juggling raw ohms across voltage levels.
But wait. The source points out a huge trap here. Actually, it's the exact trap that wrecks the load flow models of unsuspecting junior engineers all the time. When you walk up and look at the physical nameplate on a generator or transformer, the manufacturer gives you the equipment's impedance as a percentage or a per unit. But here is the kicker. That value is based entirely on the equipment's own power rating, not your system's overall base rating.
And the stakes for missing that little distinction? They are absolutely massive. If you take a 15 MVA generator's 15% nameplate reactance and you just plug that straight into a 100 MVA system study without converting it, you don't just get a tiny rounding error. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a mathematical grenade. You literally create a devastating 6.7 times error. Boom! Your model is instantly broken and you've completely thrown off every single fault and load flow calculation downstream.
So, to stop that from happening, we absolutely have to use the change of base formula you see right here. I'm not going to bog us down reading out the algebra, but the concept is just beautifully straightforward. You simply scale the old per-unit impedance by the ratios of the new power and voltage bases compared to the old ones. It is an absolutely crucial step to translate raw manufacturer data into the actual reality of your grid.
Let's look at how that manufacturer data transforms when we run it through the formula. So, that generator nameplate says 15% reactance on a 15 MVA base, right? But when we mathematically adjust it to fit our 100 MVA system study, we see the normalized data become 1.0% reactance on that new base. It's a completely different value.
translating the equipment's worldview into your system's worldview is literally the only way to ensure your network simulations actually reflect reality.
Now, throughout this explainer, you might have noticed our sources keep mentioning a 100 MVA system base. And that really begs the question, right? Why does the entire power industry default to standardizing on exactly 100 MVA? Why not 37 MVA or 50? Is there some unbreakable law of electrical physics that demands the number 100?
Well, let's demystify the standard. There is absolutely zero physical reason for it. None. It was chosen purely for trivial mental math. Think about it. Dividing or multiplying by 100 is instant. It allows all those per unit values to read almost exactly like percentages. So a 12 MVA transformer? It instantly reads its 0.12 per unit of system capacity at a single glance. That sheer, simple, human convenience is literally the entire reason 100 MVA became the undisputed industry default.
So, looking back at our journey today, the per-unit system allows us to take chaotic, multi-voltage zones and completely normalize them. We do this by establishing common power and voltage bases and by always using that change of base formula to avoid the ultimate rookie nameplate trap. And why does all this matter? Well, because getting these baseline numbers right is the absolute mathematical foundation for ensuring a stable, functioning global power grid.
Next up on the agenda is Phase 2, component modeling. But before we wrap up, just take a second to think about this. We have taken the world's largest, most complex physical machine, the power grid, and mathematically collapsed it down into a handful of simple, continuous numbers floating right around 1.0. It's honestly kind of amazing. If we can simplify the grid that beautifully, what kinds of secrets are hiding in the internal models of the spinning machines themselves? Stick around, because we're going to find out.